I was thinking about good ideals. There's this channel that where they always talk about, is it a good idea to microwave, some particular thing? And I get to thinking about that. Not so much about microwaving stuff, but, when people think of what is a good ideal, what's a good ideal? Is it a good idea to stick my tongue in a light socket that, to a lamp that's plugged in to the wall and stick my tongue in that socket? Is that a good ideal? I don't think so, but some people might think that's a great ideal. I was thinking about one time watching something on the news about this DJ, and they didn't fire him. I think they should have, though. But he was doing some crazy stuff, and he had always done stuff like this, So he decided to do some really nutty thing, like put his tongue on one of those bug zappers. The things that, you go into certain places and they have these things that when the flies go into it, the thing zaps the bug with electricity. Well, he decided to put his tongue on that, live on the air, on the radio station. And he got, of course, obviously, the outcome. He got shocked. He didn't get killed, but he got, burns on his tongue and everything else. And he's screaming and hollering. And he just thought that was so funny because he got a lot of attention and everything else. If I were the owner of that radio station, I would have fired him because that's silly. To do certain type of stunts, it's not a good idea. Not a good ideal. But, sometimes people do things, and there are people who regularly do things that are not really good ideals, but to them it is a good ideal. Why? It's a good ideal for that person because they get what they want. They got a lot of attention and they got a lot of things. But I'm thinking about good ideals and bad ideals, and it's about judgment. It's not so much about the ideals, but about judgment. I've done a lot of things in my life that I thought were good ideals. And I still think they're good ideals, even if they failed. I just think that an ideal succeeding depends on a lot of factors. I know I'm kind of jumping all over the place. So just like all my videos, they don't really make sense. But a lot of time, an ideal might not work at a certain time, but it might work later. I remember years ago when I was a kid going to the Museum of Science and Industry. And they always have different exhibits about things. And one of the things they had was something about an electric car. Basically, I think it was like an old one, an antique electric car. That's kind of an interesting concept. Now you think with these electric cars coming out now, like with the Chevy Volt and the Nissan Leaf and everything. And, back in the days before when they had electric cars, but it didn't work. And they even made a documentary about it. I'm thinking this electric car, this antique electric car, was created back in 1905. An electric car that had an electric motor, used batteries and everything else. It's kind of bulky, but it worked. It was an electric car. And I remember when I was a kid, here in Chicago, riding on the CTA, and they used to have electric buses. I don't know if they had batteries in them, but they did have a cable that connected. Just like trains, you have electric trains. And they still have them in Mexico City. I know that, because going there, they have the same type of thing with the cable connected to the... So, it's interesting. Ideals that work and ideals that don't work. The electric car back in 1905 just didn't take off because it was kind of bulky and big, and I'm sure it was expensive in those days. Maybe it cost $1,000 to build, which was probably a lot of money. Cars were kind of cheap. I have some magazines from 1926, I think, National Geographics. And in there's advertisement for different things, and one of them was for cars. You see how a nice luxury car, that costs $1,000. Wow. Brand new. That would be nice. And that was expensive. I remember looking at old newspapers for cars that cost like $800. Brand new. Brand new car, $800 or $400 or something. It was like, that's unbelievable. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. The thing about ideals, I'm always thinking out as I'm talking. I think at the same time, so I'm just thinking about this. What makes an ideal good and what makes an ideal bad? Nothing really makes it good or bad, really. It's just timing sometimes. Because many new ideals are really old. It's like cars nowadays I'm thinking about cars with the paddle shifters. Paddle shifters have been around since the 1930s. But now all of a sudden this idea is spreading like as if it's totally brand new. It's so many things that it's just kind of odd when you think about it. Ideals have to be in an environment that are supported. That's one thing about things. If people had the ideal of certain things being true in the past, those ideals continue to be supported now, even if there's no evidence to support them. There's no evidence outside of the fact that people continue to encourage each other to believe it. This is not about religion, by the way, but it's just about anything. It's like about the economy and about the government and about certain notions that we have about things. We continue with things. Is it a good ideal? Well, it might be a good ideal because you fit into the society by believing it. You fit into the group by accepting the ideal. If you accept the ideal, you embrace the ideal, you talk positively about the ideal, you accept it. It's like currency. It's the currency you need to stay in that group. It's what you need. You need to buy into this ideal and to celebrate the ideal. It's just a thought, this is not a criticism of anything. It's just, I'm always thinking about stuff like that. See, I really do think about things. I don't just take a position and just hold it and this, that, and the other thing. I'm always thinking about it. Why do we accept things? Why do some ideals work? Why do some ideals don't work? Why do some ideals don't work at one time, but they work later? And sometimes ideals have to be, they just don't stay the same. They become, they're modified. I'd like to kind of look at it now. I'm going to even do a little bit of research looking it up. What is the difference between the electric cars today and the ones that before when they came out with them and somehow it just didn't work? If they work today, we don't know if this idea is going to work. It might fail. It's kind of an experiment. An experiment in public. You sort of throw it out and see if it flops. They may discontinue those things. Why do some things work and some things don't work? Some ideals, it's kind of funny how some ideals seem to not work. But then they do work, but they just don't, when they work, they no longer, people don't make a big deal out of it. Like I remember thinking about cars again. When Cadillac came up with a certain kind of car that worked, it was like an 8-cylinder car, but it could work where 4 of the cylinders would work at a time if you needed just a little bit of power, or 6 cylinders or 8. So it could shift back and forth between using more cylinders or less. Well, that's normal in cars today. That actually is used a lot. But at that time it was advertised as a big deal, and that car was actually a flop. Well, why is it that ideal seemed to flop then, but now it's okay now? But it's not even, people don't even realize that. They have a different name for what they call it, but it's just funny how ideals go through this transformation and rebadging and renaming, and sometimes it's just even the name of an ideal, what you call it, what you say about it. Ideals are an interesting thing. They sort of have a life and they evolve. They kind of go through an evolution process. This is just kind of random, so you can just turn it off at any time. I think I'm going to stop right here because I'm just going. This is not about anything. It's just me thinking. That's all.